What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to Around the Burgh. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here with our bye-week episode, I guess it is. We're going to kind of do some Steelers notes about the news. We'll talk about some possible trade deadline acquisitions and even some draft prospects. And then we'll do a quick recap of what's going on in the AFC North. But before we get into all that, I'll introduce my co-host, Shayne Kubis. Shayne, how you doing tonight?
I'm feeling all right. Looking forward to talking about some stuff and not having to go through any roller coasters this week in particular. So that's
Yeah,
always good.
this will be a nice, relaxing weekend from an
Yeah,
NFL football standpoint.
yeah,
No mid-afternoon into the evening heart attacks, which will be
exactly.
a
Yeah,
very good change of pace. But at this point in the bye week, Steelers are 3-3, and I think that if you had told me that without telling me the results, I would have been like, "All right, cool," because assume lost to the Bills, lost to the Packers, and maybe lost to the Seahawks. Hey, maybe Russell Wilson balls out, whatever. That is the record. Losses are a bit different than I thought they would be, but
yeah,
all things considered, it hasn't been terrible.
yeah. And I think the thing that you already said about it, like the record isn't really the thing that's surprising. It's how we've gotten to that record, right?
Hmm.
We didn't expect the Bengals to come out to a 4-2 start. We didn't expect the offense to be this bad, especially early in the season. They've
Hmm.
picked it up a little bit, obviously, the last couple of weeks, but it's really more about the way we've gotten to 3-3 that's unexpected, not the fact that we are.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, I think injuries have played a big part of that for the Steelers, especially on defense. Nothing really big aside from Alualo and Tuitt to some extent, but just a few guys missing here and there that kind of changed the complexion of the defense for certain weeks. But that's what the bye week is for, getting everybody healthy. And like we said, luckily, I mean, Alualo and Juju are out for the season now, but those are relative positions of strength. Hopefully Tuitt's coming back soon. They can get guys like Carlos Davis, James Washington, and Chase Claypool fully healthy for the rest of the season. So that's all good stuff. And I mentioned James Washington, and we mentioned in the last episode, it's kind of weird how he only played 8 or 9 snaps, had one
Yeah,
target, one catch, and we assumed that he was injured. But
right.
then Tomlin denied that and basically said it was a matchup thing, which was a little weird.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that too, and I was like, as much as I don't mind Ray being involved in the offense or anything like that because
Hmm.
he does a couple nice things. Like James Washington's just a better receiver, so I don't
No
really
doubt.
know what matchup they were trying to exploit there, but
Right.
I mean, it is what it
So,
is, I guess.
so then Ike Hilliard, the wide receivers coach, he had some press time and said, that's on me. And basically, the way that I understood what he was saying is that because they use Washington as kind of the backup for every position, especially the outside wide receivers, whereas Ray
Yeah.
McLeod's more of the slot specific. Based on it isn't injury related, but it wasn't that Washington was necessarily hurt in the game. It's just that his lack of full practicing during the week affected his ability to practice at various positions. So the way they wanted to use the other receivers kind of kept him out of the game, which I think you can quibble with that, be like, okay, well, but that's where the matchup thing is.
Yeah.
Like so I think they said something about working him more in the slot, but they wanted to keep Chase in the slot. So,
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the intricacies of the NFL that not a lot of people think about is kind of, oh, like if you're injured, like, but you're playing, it's like, oh, you can play, but you haven't gotten those
Yeah.
reps at certain positions. So maybe you just don't really know what you're doing. They don't want to put somebody who doesn't know what they're doing out there.
Yeah, I mean, to me, ideally, obviously, what we expected to see was Washington be the primary outside receiver opposite of Deontay, and then have Chase hopefully play a lot from the slot.
Hmm.
He's been very successful there, and we talked about it last recording too. But I think I want to see him a lot more in the slot, especially with Juju out for the season, because
Hmm.
that's just where he's going to line up and have the best matchups. Because he's still raw as an outside type of player, you can
Hmm.
still take advantage of everything that's great about Chase right now by
Yeah.
having him in the slot. So hopefully Washington's able to be that full-time outside guy starting after the bye. I'm assuming he will be then, obviously.
Yeah. I do like that all of these receivers can, I think, play every role that a
Yeah.
receiver can. Like, I think they can all play X. I think they can all play Z. I think in this bye week they worked Washington in the slot. I think he could do that.
Hmm.
I think the other guys are better options
Yeah.
because Washington isn't. I mean, even for a wide receiver in general, his skill set is kind of weird. Just because
Yeah, I mean,
he's not especially big, but he's not especially quick or fast. But he just kind of gets open and catches the ball
he's
usually.
such an interesting guy because I actually was a big proponent going into the season of really splitting Johnson's reps between slot and outside, but he's been
Hmm.
so good as an outside receiver this year so far and been able to beat guys deep and
Yeah.
with his release and everything. So I really would rather him stay there most of the time. So if someone's
Mhm.
going to take reps in the slot other than Claypool, it's probably going to be Washington moving forward. And I think the problem with him is, like you said, he doesn't have the quickness you look for from the slot position, but he does have the run after catch ability and the ability
Yeah.
to separate. So like he should be able to work there. It's just whether or not he's going to get good matchups in the slot with somebody he can beat off the line. So we'll have to see about that.
Right. And that's kind of why the other two guys are so interesting there, because they offer such big matchups in terms of size for Claypool, and then in terms of, I guess, just explosiveness for Deontay.
Yeah.
So, where Washington is kind of that's where everything is serviceable, but nothing's elite, whereas those other guys have elite traits, so you can use them to attack specific matchups that the defense is going to give you. So that'll be interesting to monitor moving forward. So the trade deadline, it's usually at the very end of October, so it'll probably be at the end of next week. If this is week 7, yeah, it's usually at the end of week 8.
Yeah, it should be.
So it's coming up, and we're going to talk about some positions that we think could use filling out. So the ones that I highlighted were basically backup running back, nose tackle, and corner, because we'll go in reverse order. So corner, guys like Cam Sutton and James Pierre have been okay, but I'm still, a little concerned about that moving forward, especially with Pierre. Didn't give up any big plays last week, but he's clearly had a propensity towards it.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
And then like nose tackle, obviously Alualu being out, and
Yeah,
it seems like Bugs is a little dinged up. Davis has missed the last few games, and the Steelers' run defense has suffered because of it. So, getting a guy who's really a true 0-1 tech who can lock down the nose would be very helpful for when the Steelers kind of get into division play and they have to play some really good running teams like the Browns and the Ravens and stuff like that.
Yeah, that position especially, like we just need more guys there at this point, between injuries and obviously not knowing what's going to happen with the rest of the depth as we go along. Hopefully we get Tua back to shore up the defensive line in general, but we still need a guy that can be the run stuffer, because we see that this team has issues for periods of time protecting against the run. It seems like it's just like it flares up at different times of games. Sometimes it's only for a little while. Sometimes it's pretty consistent. We had the whole issue with the Seahawks last week where they just kept giving up the same wide zone run every time. Now that was more scheme than anything else, but it was still like you could tell that we're not super strong at the point of attack right now in the middle of the defense. So
yeah, did you see what John Clayton said today?
Oh,
Pittsburgh radio.
Oh my god. Yeah, I heard about it.
Said Cam Hayward wasn't a Hall of Famer, but Stephon Tuitt surely is, which I think Tuitt's incredible. I think you could argue he has more kind of raw talent and ability than Hayward, maybe when he's fully healthy, and whereas Hayward just kind of has more strength and power. But I mean, based on production alone, definitely not.
It's the whole problem with it is like, okay, so like you said, Tuitt's great, right? His skill set is more in line with what you're seeing more and more out of that position now. So he's more the quickness guy, the guy that's going to get in the backfield quickly, opposed to a guy that's just so strong and powerful that he can't be stopped.
Yeah.
But I mean, Hayward is not a slouch as an athlete by any means, and never has been. But you combine that with there's just not many people in the sport that are stronger than him. If there, there's very few. And you combine that with his ability to get inside quickly and everything. It's just he's a different kind of player.
Yeah.
Like Tuitt is a Pro Bowl caliber player, whereas Hayward is a true all pro, like all decade team type of player when he's at his best.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the separation that a lot of people sometimes don't get, is like there's really good players like Tuitt, and then there's great players like Hayward and guys in that tier.
Yeah. I mean, John Clayton said that from his mom's basement after listening to a metal record. So great commercial, but that's probably the best thing he's done in decades.
Yeah, that guy's something else.
And then the other one was backup running back, which we've talked about, and obviously Anthony McFarland is hopefully coming back soon. Benny Snell suffered an injury in the Seahawks game, but then I think he was fine.
Yeah, it looked like something happened to his arm.
Yeah, it was weird.
I don't know if he just had a bruise, like a bad bone bruise or something, because that can really make you worried for a second when you feel that. But
and
I'm not sure.
Yeah, and Kalen Ballage had 2 nice runs, but I think they still would, if they could find somebody for like a really cheap price, that would be great. So we'll go with the running backs here. So I have 2 names from the Texans, and all of their running backs are in 1-year deals, so it could be any of them. But I think the 2 that interest me are David Johnson and Phillip Lindsey. And I really liked David Johnson a few years ago when he was fully healthy, and I think he's lost a good bit of that explosiveness. But
Yeah.
he gives you that kind of big body, can run, can catch skill set that Najee gives you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're like looking for a backup to Najee that can do a lot of the same things as him, just not to the same level, obviously, because of age and just decline, he would be a good fit. And that's actually he was the guy that I kind of compared Najee to coming out to a certain extent.
Yeah.
He was more explosive as younger player, Johnson was in terms of straight line speed and stuff, but the bigger back that has the ability to play essentially wide receiver if you ask him to. That was kind of my fit for them. So I think he would be a good backup to have, especially if we're not going to see, I still want to see McFarland, what he can do.
Yeah, definitely.
That's kind of the problem is like, I would like to add a back, especially if we didn't get anything from McFarland the rest of the year, but I do expect to see him back after the bye, I hope. But at the same time, everyone other than Najee that's played has not really given us enough to make me think that, man, we can rely on that guy if something happens. So it's like,
right. And I think the problem is that like you said, like Anthony McFarland gives you that like true change of pace. Like he's very different stylistically. Kalen is kind of a Najee clone almost, down to the dreads and the number and the height and weight and all that. And then Benny Snell is there as a special teams
on the
guy.
team. He's on the team.
Yeah,
So I mean,
that he is. Yeah. But they like him on special teams, it seems. So,
which I mean, that's fine. I mean, I guess they always like to have a special teamer at that position, so I guess that's fine. But
and so the other Texans running back I have is Phillip Lindsey, and he would be more of the kind of very different running back, closer to McFarland, and he obviously had a few productive seasons with the Broncos. Signed with the Texans, I don't think is doing much there because that team is just terrible.
Yeah, I mean that whole running back group is weird. Like Mark Ingram is, I guess, technically the number one guy most weeks. It seems like.
Yeah, I think him and Johnson are splitting carries. It's like 1A, 1B, and then there's Phillip Lindsey. So,
which is weird considering, like, I mean, if you're gonna try to get some upside, it would be Lindsey, you'd think. But
yeah, for sure,
that might make him a good target for people. But I think the problem with Lindsey is like he's more of that home run hitter type of player at this point. Like if he gets loose, then he's dangerous. But with this offensive line, I don't know. Even if they're getting better, obviously Najee's been able to make the most of what he's gotten, especially the last couple of weeks. But it's still not perfect by any means. Lindsey's one of those guys I could see getting like 5 carries for 8 yards behind this offensive line. So it's like,
Yeah, and then the other guy I have is Corey Clement, who's currently on the Cowboys roster. I would like him as like a third down specific option because he's a very good pass catcher to the back. I mean, him, you're a Wisconsin fan.
Yeah, I know him very well.
Very good pass catcher to the backfield. It was a big part of the Eagles Super Bowl run a few years ago.
Huge part, yeah, actually.
Yeah. So a guy that, that he'd be a good spell for Najee on third down. So and granted, we know Najee's a great receiver, but if they wanted to, if like we've seen plays where I think Balaj and Snell are out on third downs and it's like, oh no, this is bad. So he'd be an interesting option there.
Yeah, getting somebody that can at least do one of his roles consistently if we want to sit him, whether it's because we just want to give him a rest or if the game's kind of out of hand, which unfortunately we really haven't had that option anytime recently.
Yeah.
Just that we can go to and rely on, like Clement could at least do that in the passing game for sure. So be interesting for sure.
Yeah. And then, like you said, the next one would be a nose tackle or a defensive lineman. And the first one I have is Vernon Butler, who was a first-round pick by the Panthers a few years ago, and now he signed with the Bills to reunite with Sean McDermott. And the reason why I have him is because, like I said, he's on a 1-year deal, so they could be looking to shop him. And the thing is, he's just not playing because that's a pretty deep interior defensive line group there, and they like to kind of play some of their bigger ends on the inside on pass rush downs. Whereas Vernon is just like a run-stuffing nose tackle. I was like, hey, that's what we need. That'd be perfect.
Yeah, a guy like him would be great just because, like you said, it shouldn't take much to get him considering they're not really using him anyway right now. And he would fill because he's a very specific player like that we would actually need for specific plays.
Yeah.
Where we're not going to have to give him a ton of playing time. He's not going to have to worry about that. It's just like get on the field and help us not get gashed on those second down runs that are we shouldn't be giving up 10 yards on a 2nd and 8, stuff like that.
Yeah, and like just frankly, the less Henry Mondo plays, the better. So
yeah, I mean he had that one nice sack, and that's pretty much been it this year. And I'm like,
And then this next one is it's probably unlikely given who he plays for because it's Andrew Billings who plays for the Browns now. He played for the Bengals for the last few years, and I thought the Steelers were going to draft him when he came out. I think there's a lot of talk about how much the Steelers liked him as a nose tackle, and I think they ended up going with Javon Hargrave that year. So
which
worked out for both teams, honestly. But
yeah,
I don't think he's playing much for the Browns either. I think they are, which is kind of weird again. They do run a 3-4 or a 4-3, so he's more of a 3-4 nose tackle. But
yeah.
he'd be a guy, and again, I don't think the Browns would trade him in division, but
That's the problem with it is like he would be a really good fit for what we would ask him to do, kind of like Butler. But it seems like they've kind of moved forward with actually Malik McDowell of all people,
yeah,
which
is it him and Malik Jackson, I guess?
yeah, I think those are the
Yeah.
top two guys right
And
now
then,
that are playing
yeah.
because McDowell just offers a little bit more upside
Hmm.
than him at this point, especially as a pass rusher.
Hmm.
So it looks like one of those things where like he should have had a role, but just it didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
So he'd be cheap, but like you said, I don't
And
think they want to help us in any way.
And I think they drafted Tommy Togiai out of Ohio State, who was a really good run stuffing defensive tackle. So I think he's younger and I think he offers a little more pass rush
got more
upside.
juice to him for sure.
Yeah. And then the other one was Tim Settle, who's been in the NFL for a pretty long time now, but he's another big nose tackle, plays for the Washington football team, and another guy that's just defensive line is incredible, and he doesn't really fit the scheme as much anymore, and he's just not seeing playing time, given how deep they are.
Yeah, and he's actually only 24 years old, which is weird.
That's insane.
Because he's been around for a while. I remember him being a very young rookie.
Oh yeah,
but,
yeah.
like,
You're right. Yeah,
but he just doesn't, like you said. It's one of those things that, and it's unfortunate because you see a lot of players, especially on the defensive line, depending on like scheme changes or just what the coach is looking for, that they could be very good at what they do and it just not mean anything to that team.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's kind of happening to really all these guys, but Settle would be the one I'd be most interested in trying to grab because I think that he offers the right amount of youth that could be around possibly if we want to keep him around, and also still isn't getting playing time, so shouldn't be hard to get.
I'm not going to look this up, but I feel like he had an all-time like bad pro day or combine or something.
I think there's something happened with him. Because I remember there being a lot of like talk about him like coming up, and then it just didn't happen.
Now I am going to want to look it up. So we're going to vamp here for 1 second. Let's see. Okay, so he's from Pennsylvania. Actually, he's from Philly. Yeah. Okay, it's not. Yeah, okay, it's kind of bad.
Yeah, it wasn't
5'2", 240, 483 short shuttle.
That's the one that's kind of
7'7", 3 cone. 25.5-inch vertical.
Yeah.
8'3" broad jump. So I mean, you're 6'3", 330. So you're not gonna have the best numbers anyway. But that's tough. But anyway, so then last position, and this is where we have kind of a big splash one, is corner because, like we said, there's some issues there. But the guy I'm looking at is Xavier Howard from the Dolphins because the Dolphins are terrible right now.
They're just. I mean, as someone who's been a frequent guest on the ATB Bills podcast, their preview show before games, and I'm trying to like kind of just bring a different energy to it. They're just bad, like so bad in a way that you just can't expect out of a team that turned the corner a little bit last year, even with all the turmoil at quarterback going back and forth between Fitzpatrick and Tua. And like you could blame part of it, of course, on Tua missing a couple weeks, but like that team is just not good no matter what. Like
I mean, I'll just say this, that like we work with a lot of Dolphins people at ATB, so a lot of our group chat is them talking about Dolphin stuff.
Yeah,
and going into this year, I didn't see it with the Dolphins because I think they got worse across the board pretty much.
Realistically,
so I was like, okay, so we have a team that with their first year, everybody was lauding the head coach because they weren't obviously tanking. And so they weren't as terrible as people thought they would be. While they still had a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
The next year, they, quotes, almost made the playoffs when they got absolutely
that game was something else, man. I remember seeing the score, and I'm like, what happened?
Yeah, like 63-24 or something.
Stupid,
like not even close. And then this year, people were like, oh, this is the year they're going to take 64. And I was like, I still have questions about Tua, and that offensive line is terrible, and they lost a lot of pieces on defense, so I still don't get it. But anyways, I digress. Xavier Howard, seems to have been unhappy in Miami for a while.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of trade rumors out of there for years. And Steelers obviously have a pretty good history of getting defensive backs from the Dolphins.
Yeah.
But I think that would be, if the Steelers are like, if the Steelers they only have a week to do it, but if they beat the Browns this week because the Browns are really banged up and they're 4-3, like, all right, listen, we're going to go for it. This is Ben's last year. We kind of turned the corner. Let's go all in. I'm not exactly. I can't remember exactly. I think he has a contract extension now, so it'd be a little
Yeah.
tougher to trade
Well,
for him.
it's more so I think they added money to his current contract
Okay,
in the form of bonuses, I think. So they
gotcha,
basically sweetened the pot so that way he would be like, all right, I'll stay, right? Like, so he
gotcha.
wouldn't cause trouble, which it would be about making the money work at that point, which I'm sure there's ways you can do that. I mean,
I
we've
mean,
seen that any team can just create cap space because, so
waited
like,
years and all that crap.
yeah, like,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
yeah.
yeah, and like next year's Steelers cap goes up. Okay, so actually, so he is under contract for 3 more years after this year,
Yeah.
but there's a big out after this, after 2021, where you can
Yeah.
cut him without that much dead cap. But even so there's about $41 million left, only $10 million in dead cap. About
Right, which is not, yeah, that's especially for if Howard looks anything like he has in the past after, he would get traded or after he gets healthy, like that's a steal at that point.
yeah, I mean,
No
they'd
doubt.
have to trade a pretty high pick to do that.
Yeah, it would be.
So I don't think it'll happen, but that would be fun. And the other two corners I have are both corners for Atlanta, who was also awful. So they might be trying to offload some decent players. So they have Isaiah Oliver and Fabian Moreau. I believe Oliver's still on his rookie deal, and they just signed Moreau over from the Washington football team this offseason. So I assume one of those, if not both, are starting across from AJ Terrell. So maybe they could be had for a. I mean, granted, they still trade. They tried that with the Keller Witherspoon, it didn't work, so they probably won't try it again. But
Yeah, that's the problem. Is like with corners, is like if you're gonna give up draft capital for them, you pretty much, in my opinion, you need to go for broke and actually get like a
mm,
legit guy that's been consistent. Because if you blow a draft pick on a guy that is not consistently good at corner, you're just burning money at that point. Like Oliver seems to have kind of turned a corner a little bit compared to what he had been showing,
mhm.
but him being near the end of his rookie deal now, I think he was drafted 2018 or 19, one of the two. Um,
I want to
he
say
would be
18.
cheap. Yeah, he would be cheap, but at the same time, it's like I don't know if he's going to really add enough value to give up any sort
Yeah,
of pick for him.
yeah, for
And
sure.
that's where a lot of this comes down to is like all the players or positions that we could add. There isn't really guys available that would either not take a high draft pick, which the Steelers are
Hmm.
probably not going to do,
Yeah,
especially because they don't know exactly how the rest of the season is going to go at this point. And more importantly, guys who are in that middle tier that like would be worth a decent draft pick because you expect them to play well, but you don't want to do that really either. Then at that point, so
yeah, absolutely. So on that note of draft picks, we're gonna dive into some draft talk now. So it's a little tough right now because
yeah.
Steelers are 500, so they're still in the playoff race. Looking at the rest of the schedule, I think it's very likely they could still make the playoffs. So, I think we can assume that the Steelers will have a pick somewhere maybe in the late teens, early 20s.
That's the hope. Yeah.
So the biggest need ostensibly is quarterback. Obviously,
Right.
given that we expect Ben to retire at the end of this season, the problem is, and I think we brought this up a few weeks ago, is
Hmm.
that the quarterback class has been really bad this year.
It's just interesting, right? Because like coming off a class where you had 5 guys get drafted in the first round, in the
Hmm.
first 15 picks of the first round,
Yeah.
that's obviously not common. So if you're smart, you shouldn't be like, oh man, that's just what happens in the NFL. But this is a class that like realistically, there's only going to be a few guys who are even maybe considered first round talents by the time, at least I expect by the time we get to that point. And it's going to come down to like how much does the position value drive them up? Do they drive them up into the top 10 picks consistently? Do you get a couple guys that get drafted that high? Do you see a year kind of like 2013 where everyone kind of just said forget it, we don't really we don't want to do it? It's hard to say because there's going to be spots available, including possibly, like I said, the Steelers, but is there somebody there that's worth it?
Right. I mean, in addition, we have the possibility of guys like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson switching teams. So that's obviously throws a wrench in things. But like we said, this is not a good quarterback class. I think at this point, in my opinion, I would say there is one, maybe two guys I would say are like first round picks, worthy of first round picks, regardless of position of value, because generally quarterbacks, you kind of, if you're when you're predicting, you like give them about a round and a half, maybe
Roughly.
increase.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like right now, I'd say like Matt Corral and Carson Strong are probably the two
Yeah.
lock.
I could agree with you there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think you could argue for Sam Howell. I think that it's tough. It's been tough for him because he lost so much talent.
Yeah.
But, because of that fall, like he could be in play for somebody like the Steelers.
That's true. Like my whole problem with Hal specifically is I don't see enough individual like talent from him for me to think that he can do anything with a roster without it being in a situation where he has everything around him, which in a way he would, especially at skill position with the Steelers, but the offensive line still might not be quite what we want.
So you're saying the Baker Mayfield comp is very accurate?
Honestly, like, I've heard that thrown around a lot, and like I think that Mayfield has a stronger arm than him.
Yes.
But outside of that, I think they're kind of similar players, like good, not great athletes, able to make some things happen if you give them time to do stuff. But he's gonna be reliant pretty heavily on his supporting cast, which most guys that come out to a certain extent are, especially early on. But I don't think he has the ceiling of a guy that's ever going to elevate his team. And to me, unless you're going to be that type of player, I'd rather not draft that guy in the first round if I don't have to. And that's just kind of where my stance is with quarterbacks.
Yeah. So the other guy for quarterbacks that I have down is Malik Willis, who's the quarterback out of Liberty, who I've watched a decent bit of, and I think raw doesn't really encompass it at all. Like if he was a cut of beef, he would still be on the cow, and the cow would be alive.
Yeah, that's the problem with a guy like him. Like, I would definitely take a flyer on him in like the second, third round, right?
Yeah.
Because the arm talent, the ability to scramble, everything is there from a talent perspective with him. It's just whether or not can you get him to actually learn to play the position at a higher level than he currently can. And it's something where if you have the time to develop him, he's very worthwhile. Like, if you could sit him for a year or however long and give him the opportunity to develop inside of your infrastructure, inside of your system, he could hit big. But with the Steelers, obviously, yeah, we could sit him for a year and play like Rudolph or someone else we bring in if that's an option. But it's a hard sell for me at this point with him. And I liked him a lot in the pre-draft, before this season came up.
He's fun as hell, but the problem is his pocket presence, his pocket management, his decision making, his accuracy at sometimes is just, well, I mean, the arm talent, and the athletic ability is absolutely incredible, but there's a lot of refining that needs to get done. Like, if you could get him on a team that has the time to kind of put him on what was intended to be the Trey Lance and Lamar Jackson plans,
right?
And obviously those guys get on the field, but so if Ben had another year in him, which I really don't think he does, and I hope he doesn't come back, and they could kind of just sit Malik, have him watch, and then maybe, even put him in on some goal line plays where he can make something happen with his legs, that'd be fine. But I don't see that happening. But the other guy I have down is Will Levis, who's the quarterback out of Kentucky, who transferred from Penn State this year and has played pretty well. I mean, they played Georgia this last week and they lost pretty badly, but everybody's doing that to Georgia. But he's kind of, since Phil Jurkovich got hurt, and he's not on here because I don't think he's going to declare.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Levis is kind of that heir apparent of like the more traditional style quarterback, and the Kentucky's actually running a very interesting offense because it's very Rams McVay-esque because the offensive coordinator was in that system for a while. So it's a lot of play action, deep shots, but he's a very good athlete. So he'd be a guy in like the third round, maybe the fourth, and he has a lot of accuracy concerns as well. But third, fourth round, he's a guy that I'd be kind of interested in as well.
He's another one of those, like you said, a flyer guy that you look at the arm talent and the ability just to throw the football, regardless of the accuracy. It's definitely hit or miss at this point still, but he just hasn't played a lot. So I feel like kind of like the same thing with Phil. Like, he would be like the guy that you take a flyer on simply because you see the talent. You say, okay, I can afford to sit him for a while and see if we can get him up to speed.
Yeah.
And in a similar way, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe says, he's not going to declare this year either.
Yeah, I think he goes back. I think that if he like explodes in the last few weeks, like maybe he goes out.
Yeah.
Or, but he kind of gave me like some Jacob Eason vibes, but a little bit of a better athlete.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Eason
with what you will. He just got cut and signed by the Seahawks. So
I mean, yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of a few quarterbacks to keep an eye on. So I have a bunch of other positions down that I think are of need. Which one do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, kind of the biggest position actually for me that I think is going to end up needing filled, because I don't expect Hayden to be back. I think that corner is going to be a sneaky need, maybe as high as the first round for us, depending on where we fall, if the value is good there. So definitely some guys there would be interesting.
Yeah, so the guys I have down, I have two Washington corners, so we'll just get them out of the way. So I have Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon, and these guys are interesting because they're somewhat different players. So McDuffie is kind of their do-everything corner, and if any of our listeners have watched a lot of Washington defense, they're a very funky defense there, but their defensive backs are traditionally very good. And McDuffie is kind of more their field corner, and so he plays in a lot of roles and a lot of different assignments, and he plays zone well, he plays man well, he tackles really well, he has good pursuit. Everything about him is very good. I wouldn't say there's anything that's super elite about him. On the other side of the coin is Kyler Gordon, who is a pure press man, jam you out of the line, stick you in man, and that's all he does. So McDuffie, I would say, is like more of a first round guy. Gordon, more of a round 3, maybe early round 4, depending on what Steelers trades or comp pick situation is. But those two guys are kind of interesting, depending on how the Steelers want to go with their scheme moving forward.
I mean, right off the bat, I kind of feel like McDuffie probably is the better, obviously, one, because he's a better prospect, but two, just being able to do everything is something that I feel like we need to get more guys who can do that in the secondary, because I want to see them be able to do more things from a coverage standpoint than we've seen for the past few years. And a guy that can do more of that balance of everything, like be a good tackler on the edge, make sure that that is something that we don't have to worry about. Being willing to tackle, help out with the run defense, being able to match in zone or anything else, that's going to be something that I want to see them a target at that position moving forward.
Okay. The other guy I have is Nehemiah Pritchett, who's a corner out of Auburn, and he's 6'1", 180, so he's a little light, but he is freaky fast and athletic. So, Steelers' profile at corner has kind of been a little, it seems to shift a lot, but I think, like most pitchers, they try to go for really athletic guys, especially wearing underclassmen. And I think that Nehemiah Pritchett fits that build. He plays field corner as well for Auburn. And doesn't really get beat over the top. He's so fast. He's got pretty good ball skills. So he'd be a second round, maybe third round guy that I would be interested in as well.
Yeah, I mean, he does fit that profile of the athletic corner that they've been targeting for a long time. And I like having those types of guys too, just because it means that kind of the opposite of the James Pierre problem, where I like Pierre's coverage ability, but sometimes if you get him on somebody who can run down the field, and you don't have help with him, he's very susceptible to those big plays versus a guy like you said, Pritchett, that he's not going to let guys get behind him very much because of his athleticism, but is he going to be able to cover well enough on a consistent basis?
So we're going to stick in the secondary for a second because I have safety down as a need, and that is assuming that Terrell Edmonds, walks, that he walks, because they haven't picked up his 5th-year deal, which I would like for them to keep him because he has. I think he was still better last year, but that's not to say he's been bad this year. But I think they might be moving on from him, which kind of sucks because I think he's gotten a lot better.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because when they made the pick initially, and I'll just say this, I was not happy. Yeah, it was a very upset man, but he definitely grew on me over the course of time, especially last year, and even like you said, this year he's been best safety on the team so far this year. Realistically, I mean, unfortunately, but it does seem like he isn't in their plans, which, I mean, I guess I understand to a certain extent because the fact that they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, they don't seem to value him as much as maybe they should.
I think it's just more about them wanting to make sure they get Minkah. Well, they wanted to get TJ and then get Minkah under contract. Right. And then, they want to see where the cap goes. And I think it'll be a situation where they'll be like, you go out, get your money, let us know what they're going to give you, and we'll see what we can do. But it's unlikely we'll be able to match. But we still would like to have you back. If
that's possible. The question, right? Because how much our team is going to value him? Because they've seen his improvement over the past couple of years. I assume someone who's desperate enough for safety help could throw him a deal that maybe isn't a good deal, really, but it's one that makes sense for what they need and what they're looking for from him, and we just can't afford it. Which that's the problem I'm worried about.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I guess this is more of a question for you. So assuming that Edmonds walks, would you want to see the Steelers draft, and kind of regardless of round, but assume this person would be being drafted to start? Right. Would you rather see them draft a player that is a pure center fielder free safety that allows Minkah to be the move piece, or a guy who's more like Edmonds, who's more of a traditional strong safety, but perhaps can do a good amount of different stuff? And the point of that other safety would be that we're still going to make Minkah the more normal free safety.
It's tough because I like the fact that Minkah can do that, where he can move around the defense, but I still feel like realistically his best fit is just to be able to race things over the top. I like him in that role a lot. I think that when he does that, it helps our defense out, because we saw whenever he was trying to play up, closer to the line of scrimmage, especially in the Raiders game, that's how we saw the Ruggs touchdown happen. We see there's too many times it seems like deficiencies across the other parts of the secondary put him in bad situations. And if he had a more defined role that worked better for him, I think that'd be better. So going after a guy that can let him do that would be something I'd want to do.
Okay. So then the guy that I would think to bring up is Jaquan Brisker, who's the strong safety out of Penn State, who's been there a while.
Hmm.
Has kind of been a guy that's been like, okay, like, let's hope this guy can take the next step. And this year he has. He's been a really good athlete, had a lot of big plays in the Wisconsin game. It's hard hitting, strong safety, but can play a lot of different roles, kind of like Edmonds. So he'd be kind of a second round, maybe third round pick that I think the Steelers would be interested in. Now we haven't talked about the offensive line yet, but that's obviously going to be a need. I think
Yeah.
we can assume that Dan Moore seems to have the left tackle job locked up moving forward.
I hope he does.
So
solidify that over the course of the year.
And assuming that neither Banner nor Chooks really like escalates their play in a good way for the rest of the season, right tackle is going to be the position to target. So I'm looking at a guy like Darian Kennard from Kentucky, who's massive dude, 6'5", 345. Some people may say he may need to kick inside. I think if the Steelers are willing to play Zach Banner at right tackle, they can play Darian Kennard at right tackle.
Yeah.
And it's not like the right guard position is locked up long term. So if he struggles there as a rookie, maybe they bump him inside, Trey Turner leaves, and then they draft another right tackle. But I think he's a guy, especially with how the Steelers want to focus on running the ball moving forward, he's a guy that fits really well there.
Yeah, like you said, if we're willing to consider Banner as a possible starting option once he's healthy, then the size thing shouldn't really matter. And we've seen more and more tackles that are coming out that can be those big hulking type of players and still hold up in pass protection. So, and that's just the natural progression of like athleticism getting better and better across the board, and guys being able to move at sizes you shouldn't be able to move at. So, I think especially if he can test well, as far as not only the eye test, but also being able to show that he can move consistently well as laterally, then he could very well stick a tackle then instead.
Yeah. So the other guy that I have down is Bernard Ryman, who is originally from Austria. He plays offensive tackle for Central Michigan. And he was originally a tight end there. Then in 2020, they bulked him up, moved him to tackle, and he's been starting there ever since. And this guy would be like a third round guy that I think the Steelers would kind of draft in a similar mold to Chooks, in that, he's a little raw, but great athlete, good movement skills. And I think essentially still starting at right tackle. I haven't looked up where he plays right now, but you hope maybe he can switch if need be. But 6'7", 305, pretty tall, pretty long guy. So he'd be an interesting one in the mid rounds. I think could be kind of fun to look at.
I love my tight end offensive tackle projects. I like that idea all the time. But so I just think it's fun to do that type of thing with them. But honestly, like I just want to see them bring in more guys that can actually compete for spots, not only next year, but just give us a chance to develop guys and get back to that level of offensive line play that we've been so used to for the past decade. It's hard watching games, especially early on this season when it was even worse. Like it doesn't feel right for the Steelers to be bad on the offensive line right now. So
speaking of positions where it's weird to not have the Steelers be dominant, we'll go on a nose tackle now. And the guy I have down, I don't expect to be there for the Steelers because I think he's going to be there a lot higher because of how well he's played this year. And it's Jordan Davis, the nose tackle from Georgia, because I'll give a full disclosure. Like when I scouted him in the summer, I thought he didn't really have a pass rush. He just stopped the run. And I was like, that's great and all. You're 6'6", 340. You're an insanely sized person. But right now, I just don't think the NFL values a massive nose tackle with no pass rush ability. This year, he's found it. And he doesn't have many sacks, but he's getting pressures like nobody's business.
Right.
And he's still absolutely dominant in the run game. So, if the Steelers trade up for a nose tackle, I'd be pretty shocked.
Yeah.
I just don't think he's going to fall there, but I just kind of want to talk about him because he's been insane.
He's just one of those guys, right? Like where if you're going to be a defensive tackle and specifically a nose tackle at that size and you bring no pass rush ability, like you said, that's just a position that it doesn't matter how good it doesn't matter how good you are at that. You are only going to be valued so highly unless you're like getting drafted by the Giants or something. But, no offense to Dave Gettleman, but if you can at least push the middle of the pocket, like the inside of the pocket, right? If you can push the middle, you don't have to finish sacks. You don't have to be the guy that's finishing these plays, but getting interior pressure in the face of quarterback as a nose tackle consistently can make you not only a 3-down player in a lot of situations, but make your value skyrocket compared to a guy who can just do the run stopping part. And that's where you said that difference is why now the expectation is going to be, assuming he keeps his level of play up, we're probably not going to be in play for him unless we do make a move up for him.
Yeah. And there's two things that came up with Jordan Davis, and one of them I heard somewhere else. The other one I kind of came upon myself. The first one is that the NFL values size, almost regardless of athletic ability. Like
Yeah.
if you are that massive, you will be drafted. You will most likely be drafted high.
Yeah.
Just because simply there are not that many people that are 6'6", 340 that move
At
even
all.
even well at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you'll be drafted. The second thing I thought of is that with the NFL moving towards a lot of these kind of, I guess, Rams-ish defense with 3-man fronts that are asking they're asking 3 defensive linemen to own a gap and a half, so you can basically be gap sound and stop the run with less defenders in the box.
Right.
I think a guy like him actually becomes more valuable.
Yeah.
Because you can keep him on the field because you're essentially you're keeping 3 defensive linemen on the field at all times because you want to be able to stop the run. Because then you can still keep, only maybe you have an outside linebacker that's an edge rusher, 2 off-ball linebackers, then you still have 5 defensive backs. So because you're playing gap and a half or 2 gapping with 3 down defensive linemen in the front, you can still stay in nickel on the back end. So therefore you can stop the run and stop the pass. And I think that a guy like Jordan Davis allows you to do that. And a big part of that is because he now can offer you at least a decent amount of pass rush ability by, just collapsing the center into the quarterback's lap.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move on from our draft guys, unless I have some names down. Anybody else you want to touch on, Shane?
I mean, really, like I said, at this point, like receiver is an interesting thing because we don't know who's going to be back from that group other than the guys who are under contract. Is Juju going to maybe try to come back on a short deal again since he didn't get a chance to prove anything really this year? Does Washington move on to somebody? I mean, you assume that we're going to lose at least one of them, if not both. So that position is going to need to be at least a little bit reinforced.
Yeah. And if history is any indication, the wide receiver will be drafted in the second or third round, most likely the second. So
and then also be, a Pro Bowl
be rookie in
the
running for rookie of the year. Yeah, for sure.
Right,
exactly.
So,
All right. So we'll move into our last one, which is the AFC North Roundup. So we're just going to kind of run through each of the teams and kind of take their pulse. So we'll start with the Ravens, who are first in the division right now with only 1 loss, which was their week 1 loss to the Raiders, which was very chaotic.
Something else.
And then since then, they've been able to weather a lot of injuries to the running back and corner position, and they haven't lost since. And mostly it's because Lamar Jackson has been playing at an MVP level again.
Yeah, seeing him play this year, and people have consistently, and I understand, especially if for Steelers fans and stuff, they don't want to talk about it and give him props, but the narrative around him for so long with the whole build, he's just, he can just run the ball, and occasionally if everything's perfect, he can pass. But it's not the case. We've seen even last week, he had the 2 picks and everything. One of them I think was a drop type of thing, and he just got picked off. But when he's on in the passing game, especially, he owns the middle of the field, which is something I'm very jealous of.
Yes,
he just, whatever he's on, he's as good as anybody right now throwing the football, and that's just what it is.
Yeah.
If you can get him to where he has a couple struggles throwing the football, then he's just going to take off again. He's not using his legs in the same way that we've seen him use them because the running game isn't there in the same way. Obviously, you're missing essentially your top 3 backs from last year.
Hey, come on. They have the 2014 All-Stars at running
back.
Right,
exactly. It's man, I mean, Devontae Freeman was good 5 years ago.
Le'Veon Bell wearing number 17.
Yeah, what was that about, by the way?
Insane.
I don't
he looks
even
so thin,
about...
too. He looks like a wide... I thought he was a wide receiver, honestly.
He's got to be
there's no way that's him.
He's got to be 210 pounds, if that.
Yeah, he looks insane, which is crazy because he was 250 when he got drafted.
Yeah, when he got in the league,
Yeah,
and he was hovering around 225 for most of his career.
Yeah.
But that whole running back group.
I'm not mad or anything.
No, it's fine. Yeah, he can play.
How's he doing? Has he asked about me?
Right.
My nickname for him in college was Bavion, for what it's worth.
I mean, listen, as someone who's a Big Ten fan in general of football and watches a lot of Big Ten football, that dude was the guy at Michigan State, and it's so funny watching him get in the league. And I don't want to go on a tangent about him, but I'm this dude is gonna be 220 pounds now, and just jump cut and do stupid crap. What happened to him? What was that about?
Yeah.
Anyway, but that whole offense is just littered with injuries. I mean, they're not going to have Stanley. I think
he's out for the season. He's
done. He's out for the season now, right? Because he had surgery.
Yeah, he's done.
And it's just Lamar's yeah, whatever. I'll just account for 500 yards.
Yeah,
and to come.
And they're getting Rashad Bateman finally played last week, and he's healthy, so that's bad.
So he'll only probably get better as the season goes on.
Yeah, exactly. So
they're
their defense is, it's the Ravens defense. It is what it is. Odafe Oweh looks like the defensive rookie of the year.
Why not?
Absolutely insane.
Not like he couldn't, sack anybody at Penn State one time. Crazy stuff. Yeah. I
Yeah,
don't know.
so they're looking really good right now. And then the Bengals are looking like kind of the surprise team of the first third of the season. Only 2 losses. They lost to the Packers in a close game, and then they lost, or a few weeks before they lost to the Bears, where Joe Burrow just kind of randomly imploded.
Yeah, you just decide the other team wanted the ball more than
Yeah,
everyone else. It
so
was really weird. Yeah.
and since then, I mean, granted, they've beaten the Vikings close, the Jaguars close, and then last week they beat the crap out of the Lions. So,
Yeah.
Not the most impressive wins, some decently impressive losses or decently close losses. So, I think they're a frisky. They're a frisky team.
They're the team that can beat anybody and can lose to anybody, right?
All right,
That's where they're at.
Do we just want to keep rattling off like football cliches?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're doing.
It's any given Sunday.
Literally any given Sunday, but more so with them.
Nobody wants to play them.
You listen. You can line this team up against, like I said, anybody, and
I
I wouldn't be surprised if they won the game or if they got blown out or because they have talent in very key places at this point, and the defense has definitely come around big time for them compared to what they've shown the last couple of years. But it's still just growing pains, right? It's going to be Joe Burrow getting into his own, still playing much better than I think some people are expecting. Him coming off the injury, Jamar Chase has been, pretty much the rookie of the year.
He's going to be rookie of the year.
If he keeps up even sort of this pace, like it doesn't matter what Najee does. Like the impact that Chase has had on that offense has been very apparent with the deep passing game, and if everything clicks, this team could sneak into the playoffs. I think by the end of the season, if everything keeps going, but either way, like even if it does kind of come off the rails for them a little bit, they're going to be very happy, I think, with the development of where they're getting. So,
yeah, I mean, the offensive line is, being serviceable. The defense is, I mean, I think the thing is like, with the Bengals, they always make like a decent amount of free agent signings and they just like never work out. But like this year, they seem to all be working out. Like Mike Hilton's playing well.
Yeah.
DJ Reader's back healthy and he's awesome.
He's great.
Chidobe Awuzie, who's I think one of the most underrated corners in the NFL, is playing very well for them.
Yeah, he's doing a great job.
Eli Apple hasn't killed them yet. So, so some of these things like Eli Apple, the offensive line, like they're kind of a ticking time bomb. Like,
most likely, yeah.
Because they'll probably go wrong. But, I think they're a good team. Like you said, they'll be lucky because their schedule will be pretty easy going down the road. But, it'll be interesting to see where they're going. So the other team, obviously, is the Browns, who was everybody's favorite again this offseason. And they had some decent games, but now they are just banged up as all hell.
And that's the question for this team, right? Is like they're kind of in a win now mode for sure after the improvement they've had over the past 2 years.
Yeah.
And Baker's dealing with a labrum injury now where they're expecting him to play through it this year.
That's what happens when you have that chip on your shoulder that you
and it just weighs you down.
Yeah, you just keep getting bigger, just pulls it off, pulls your labrum off.
Gets screwed up in there, yeah.
Yeah.
But if he can play like he did early in the season and then the back half of last year, more the rest of the year, then they'll be fine. But what are they going to get out of him at this point if he is banged up and he has to deal with the torn labrum? Because they're going to need to, especially if the injuries keep mounting. Because right now I think there is Hunt down too.
Yeah, Hunt's out for a while. I think Chubb is like I don't think so.
Week to week or something.
We're recording on Thursday night about an hour before the game, and it doesn't seem like he's not going to play this week. He might play next week. We'll see.
Right.
But they're both not healthy. Odell and Jarvis are kind of cycling in and out of the lineup.
Yeah.
I think the tight ends and offensive line are healthy. I think the defense is mostly healthy, but the defense has just been incredibly inconsistent. Like they've been okay against like the Vikings and the Texans, but then against like the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Cardinals, they've just been abysmal.
It seems like they're at a point right now where like the talent level.
When against the Bears, they were very good.
Right. I mean, granted,
for all that's worth.
The Bears do everything they can to make it easy for the defense, but whatever. That's something else that I don't want to watch the Bears. When we play the Bears, I'm going to be more upset, I think, about their offense than ours, even if ours is bad. Because
I think that's a Monday night game. People are going to be furious. At the Manning cast, they'll have a fun time.
Peyton's going to be like, you have a guy in Justin Fields, and you're not giving him the football. No, whatever.
Peyton's gonna have like that vein just bursting out of his massive forehead.
He's gonna be watching like Ben be old. He's gonna be watching Justin Fields be.
I think he'll give Ben a break because he knows what that feels like.
Right. But he'll just be like, I'm not gonna enjoy watching Ben be old. But like, and he's gonna be like, Justin Fields is out here, this great athlete, and can throw the ball anywhere on the field. And they're like, now we'll just run the ball 40 times. Like, okay, whatever.
But if the Browns can get healthy, I think they can definitely make a run.
Right.
But it's just hard to predict that right now because and there's also the issue of like, is Odell good for this offense? several question marks, and like there's a lot of evidence you can point to, at least analytically, that says no. But
I just want them to trade him, not even because like I think that they can't make it work with him or anything like that. It's just I remember watching Odell not from his rookie season onward and just being so impressed with the way he played the game.
mm-hmm.
And I just want to see it again because I think the talent level is still there. I think he's not too old or anything. The injuries have mounted with him, but I just want to see him, whatever scheme it has to be, whatever team it has to be, somebody use this man and bring him back. Like, I hate seeing such good players, whether it's through the fault of their own injuries, just not working with the team they sign with and trade to. I hate it when I see guys that are his talent level. I mean, this was a guy who was on a pace that not many have ever had, like never been on as a receiver. To just kind of hit that wall and fall apart, it sucks.
I almost don't want to say this because there was a lot of smoke around this when he was getting traded the first time, and that was him going to New England.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that's going to help him a whole lot, but I mean, he would definitely be like clearly their number one option. But it's just whoever it ends up being, I do think that it would be smart for the Browns to try to get something for him because at the rate it's going, I just don't know if they're going to ever bring his value back up from where it is at this point. So,
yeah, it's funny. This is a bit of a tangent, but one of my best friends is a Patriots fan, and he always said like the Steelers and the Patriots to just swap their abilities to draft wide receivers and defensive backs because we can't draft defensive backs in our lives, and they can't draft wide receivers to save their lives. So
literally, they can't draft a receiver. It's almost unbelievable. Like I can't even remember the last receiver.
I mean, Jacoby Myers is good. They just can't.
He can't score touchdowns.
Yeah, I
don't understand that. And you know what's funny? This has nothing to do with actual football, but I occasionally, even though it pains me most of the time, I play Madden still occasionally. And I signed Jacoby Myers to be my slot receiver all the time, and he never catches the football for some reason. He gets like 20 I'm like, the game is literally designed to force feed slot receivers. He doesn't catch any passes. Like, what is going on? Does the NFL and Madden just hate him? Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
I don't know.
But
in terms of the other AFC teams, it seems like the AFC West is going to have at least 3 teams in the playoffs.
Seems like it
could be 4, which would keep the Steelers out. But
oh my god,
But so the Steelers, and unfortunately they have that loss to the Raiders, which is not going to help them at all down the road.
We beat Denver at least.
That's true. And then they still play the Chargers and the Chiefs, who are going to be tough. But they're going to need to keep those teams out. I think the Colts and Pats have losing records right now, but I think they could make a push if things go well. But I'm still not sure. So Steelers are kind of right on the cusp, and they'll have to, kind of fix a lot of their issues moving forward. But that'll do it for us for our bye week episode. We'll be back on the beginning of next week with probably another kind of just bye week wrap up. Or I think we're gonna have our guest on that episode, which will be very exciting to talk some Steelers stuff with him. But in the meantime, Shane, let people know where they can find your work.
You can find me at Shane Kubas on Twitter. Again, not this week. I might still be tweeting just about other stuff just to fill the void since I won't be tweeting about the Steelers game. Yeah, I mean, I'll have to struggle to find something. But and then you can obviously find us. It's ATB Steelers. Look for us stuff coming out there. And then you can find my work at Steel Curtain as well for writing.
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE. Like Shane said, make sure you're following Steelers ATB. Thank you for joining us tonight. We hope to have you back next time.